interested in doing with this is, like, in my mind, it's connected to decolonization. Based on everything we've done in the class, like we've ended up with a sense of an aggressive kind of settling that is constantly re-articulating itself. Like, its whiteness continually obsessing over passing as white, in ways that are very active here and easy to see, easier than any place I've ever lived in America. More overt, more explicit, self-parodying, like this Hudson Valley Vernacular Architecture Association, yes, where they literally talk about, in one passage, a woman fights off the Indians in this house, and then the house is preserved. She fights the Indians off. She saves the house. Then, now 200 years later, land developers are now taking the house, and in this Hudson Valley Vernacular Architecture narrative, the author concludes the land developers have succeeded where the Indians failed. So they're the same thing, land developers and Indians. And they're constantly references.
The property is more.
Right. There are constantly these references throughout this website to Indians as hostile. You know, it really is. I've actually done some research into the Afrikaner culture and the way that they describe themselves in this whole notion of the lager, which is this word that means when you circle the wagons together and you keep out in that case, the black people, because they were going to attack you. And the kind of mentality that develops, which is a mentality of, like, virtue, like a notion of virtue, a notion of being a sacredness in your space. And so that's happened here through the metaphors of the Hudson River School, which, you know, the Hudson River School says, this is the new Eden. You know, here we are, like, in this beautiful landscape. It's empty. You know, there are no little black gay male couples from Africa stumbling out into the landscape a la Tracy Rose. But, you know, it gives you this place. So I guess, in a way, I feel like that's the complexity of it, is that the sort of the adversarial nature of the aestheticization of this landscape and of the sort of the racialization, which is invisible. And that's what struck me as amazing being here at Bard. Nobody even notices it. Like, I remember when I was at Wellesley, we used to sort of engage to some extent with the sort of Boston history, and definitely with the history of Wellesley, and the fact that we knew which dorm had been the financial aid dorm. You know, I refused to do work study when I was there because I didn't like the fact that the work study students did the dishes for these girls who would come down to breakfast literally in full formal wear. Whereas here at Bard, everyone's in, like, jeans, you know, and we're all, like, pretending to be poor.
Right.
But, you know, so it seems like there's more denial here. You know, and then in this sort of, like, multicultural liberal arts college fantasy, everyone's completely satisfied and happy in their own little corner. And all the dots kind of connect, and, you know, everybody kind of matches up with their own kind. And then, you know, there's no conflict. And everything's great. And so everything that's, like, slippery and dangerous and contradictory is just kind of left out. Maybe some student will do a project at some point where some aspect of this project gets turned back onto the landscape in the way that people have done with, you know, all these other locations. Because I feel like people haven't thought of this as material. I mean, if you look at the way that the average Bard dweller views the Bard surrounding area, it's like, you know, yeah, I can't wait to get to the city. Or, like, you know, people are unfamiliar with, like, even the most, like, minimal details of the roads or the buildings, or and that's why I think it's interesting that Bard at the same time is so rooted in this history and this landscape. Like, there's actually a book, A History of Bard, by this guy Remer Klein, that I read. I read part of that, actually. Yeah, yeah. I sometimes read parts of it to students who come in my class, or in my office, because it's hysterical, because there are all these references to, like, how we got Blythewood, and how there was this contested, weird relationship between the Bard students and the people that owned Blythewood. But it's also really obvious that this was at a time when all the Bard students were white, and I think it goes back to the all-male time of Bard. And sometimes they would still sort of misbehave, and, like, there would be vexed relations between the college and Blythewood. And then at a certain point, Blythewood was just given to Bard, you know, and then it becomes like sort of annexed, and it's part of the Bard Pastoral. So we're totally cozied into this whole scene, but, you know, in a way, it's weird. I mean, and this is kind of very Bard. In a way, it is like the rich kid that doesn't want to know where his parents' money comes from. And maybe that, you know, maybe that is the essence of what this place is about in some way, partly at least. You know, kind of, but it's partly through shame, partly through denial, partly through apathy, boredom. Like, because what is the Hudson River School aesthetic to a hipster? It's the most unhip thing imaginable. I think it is kind of like interesting to think about how the whiteness of this landscape strikes people, because I know that when I first came here, it just struck me as like something, the landscape and the beauty and the sort of like the pastoral nature. I kept saying over and over again when I first came here, wow, I'm in a Hudson River landscape. You know, it's like when I go to France, I love the French countryside, and I love to go to different places in France and say to myself, wow, you know, like I'm in the painting, and like it hasn't changed. You know, all this rhetoric that now in this class has become like so loaded and so charged in really kind of complicated ways, because, you know, we read this this piece about Montgomery Place, which is close to here, like 5 minutes away, and it's produced by the HRH, like the Hudson River Heritage Society, which, you know, and that word heritage, I think is, it's a bit of a disturbing word, because it has sort of implications of, like, there's a sort of correct kind of heritage and ancestry that they're promoting. And as I was saying to someone today, like, Dutchess County is, I think, something like 15% or 20% Italian, but there's nothing about that. And a lot of them have been here since the 19th century. There's nothing even about Catholics or Jews. I mean, we're talking, this is like, not just white, but Anglo-Protestant, Northern European, not even Southern European. There are no Slavs, there are no, you know, there's a very particular, like, sort of history that is focused on in all of the local historical societies, and on the websites of towns like Red Hook and Rhinebeck. And if you read the local paper in Rhinebeck, they actually will talk about sort of the families who've been here for a long time constantly in the newspaper, and their stories and their sort of genealogies. We went to the Red Hook antique store, and it was me, Kane, Sienna, and Dachi, and Nick, you were there too. We came into the Red Hook antique store, and we asked to look at their Black Americana collection. And when we first walked in, like, I guess, like, Shauna was the only white person, and Sienna's like 6'2", and like, I'm obviously, like, you know, kind of scary, right? So these ladies in the antique store were literally like, just that thing where people are kind of like they're thinking, like, do I go call the police right now, or like, do we just fall to the ground, or do we, you know, they had that, they were doing that kind of body movement. And then I could have put them at ease right away by saying, hi, you know, I'm a professor at Bard, like, these are visiting artists, but I didn't. First we were just like, we'd like to see the Black Americana, and then, like, and it's all, you guys will see these images. And they were kind of nervous, like, to even show us these images, which will be really understandable to you once you look at them. And then we're kind of like pawing through them. Then we noticed that as we go further into the store is full of like racist dolls, figures, and I've never seen anything like it in my life. Like, I'm obsessed with antique stores, and I'm always looking, usually for this racist stuff, because I'm fascinated by it. And usually you can't find it, because people are obsessed with it and people collect it, and also because it's either that or people are freaked out by it. And here in Red Hook, what was interesting is a lot of these postcards had been sent back and forth from the South to upstate New York. Like, they're postcards that people actually, you know, had used and everything, and they're I had actually never seen anything like it, even in all the different, like, racist postcards I'd seen. I'd never seen anything like some of these.
I think landscape also allows you to kind of forget the human involvement. Like when I look at especially the less sculptured but still kind of sculptured grounds of an estate, I forget the people who are involved and kind of allow myself to think about the nature of it. And with problematic properties like plantations or estates up here, it's one of those points where I guess I don't feel guilty looking at the grounds and thinking about how gorgeous it is. I feel really awkward. I'm from South Carolina in Charleston, so I feel really awkward within plantation houses. Like, I had used to go on tours because our schools would take us to go witness the history of South Carolina, and there's a distinct awareness and kind of education, and up here I feel like a lot of that is even more swept underneath because I'm in the north now, and so it's got a different history that feels like a lot of people feel like it's much less tainted. And the grounds here are just so pretty, and you don't think about all of the people. Like, there's this intense distancing that when you don't see the evidence, the like sort of concrete evidence of people, you are able to like not think about it. And so we've distanced the labor that went into creating these settings and these images we've like distanced ourselves out so that we're no longer a part of this picturesque equation, and like what we do, like the labor that went into it, or like the people who appreciate it, or the people who are oppressed by it, like you don't think of it when you look out across the Hudson River, like what went into raising all of that land to make this open field.